I arrived for the family reunion I paid for. The place was empty. My wife texted, "It was a trial, you failed." Her cousin said, "You should have known better than to trust us." I just nodded. But the next morning, they found their bank accounts frozen. I'm not really sure what made me say yes. Maybe it was the way Mara had been talking lately, all soft-voiced and nostalgic, like we were characters in some old family drama on TV. Maybe I was just tired of the silence that had crept between us like fog, thick and damp, and always there even when the lights were on. Or maybe I just wanted to believe that after everything, 21 years of marriage, 3 miscarriages, 1 long overdue promotion, and a dog we'd buried together, we still had something worth salvaging. "Brendan," she said one night while I was stirring the chili. "I was thinking, maybe we should do something this year. A family reunion." I looked up from the pot. "Like, your side or mine?" "Mine," she said quickly, too quickly. "We haven't seen each other since, God, since Colette's retirement thing. That was 5 years ago. 7. I chuckled. Time flies. She didn't laugh. Just stood there, arms crossed over that cardigan she always wore when she wanted something. "I think it'd be good. For everyone. For us." That "us" sat heavy in the air. I didn't say no. I didn't even hesitate. I just nodded and started listing possible weekends, because that's who I am. The guy who says yes when he should ask questions. The guy who pays deposits and books caterers and assumes the best of people, even when they've proven they don't deserve it. I found this beautiful property up by Lake Charlevoix. Big deck. Sleeps 20. Private dock. Expensive, but worth it. Or so I thought. I spent weeks planning, coordinating flights, fielding passive-aggressive texts from Mara's Aunt Denise about gluten-free options. I even rented paddleboards because Mara said Blaine and Lyra loved those. I didn't even like Blaine. Something about his teeth. Too white, too perfect. I took a few extra days off work to get up there early and make sure everything was perfect. Bought a dozen citronella candles. Washed every plate. Set up name cards on the bunks for the kids, even though I knew they'd ignore them. I was nervous, if I'm honest. Nervous in the way someone gets before a big speech or a bad diagnosis. The first car was supposed to arrive at 3 p.m. Friday. At 2:58, I was standing by the window with a lemonade. At 3:15, I thought maybe they hit traffic. At 4:30, I tried calling Mara. Straight to voicemail. At 6, I opened a bottle of Cabernet I'd bought for the adults. By 7:10, I was sitting on the dock, phone in hand, heart in my throat. The sun was setting when my phone finally buzzed. One text. From Mara. "It was a trial, Brendan. You failed." That was it. No punctuation, no explanation. Just 7 words that cracked something open inside me. I stared at the screen. Thought maybe it was a joke. Some twisted prank her family cooked up, maybe to test my loyalty or my patience or, I don't know, my gullibility. Then the phone rang. It was Blaine. I didn't even get a hello. "You should have known better than to trust us," he said, his voice smug and lazy like he'd been rehearsing the line. "What the hell is going on?" I asked. He laughed. "You're not stupid, Brendan. Don't play dumb. You wanted to prove yourself? Well, you did. Just not in the way you think." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, phone still to my ear, listening to the silence. It wasn't anger I felt first. It was shame. I'd bent over backward to make that weekend happen. Used money I'd been saving for a trip to Ireland. Told my boss I needed family time. And all of it, every single part, was a lie. I slept on the couch that night, fully clothed, with the front door unlocked. Not because I was waiting for them to show up, but because a small, stupid part of me still hoped Mara would come and say it was all a joke. That they'd pull into the driveway laughing, cameras in hand, some cruel version of an intervention. But the morning came, and no one arrived. What did arrive, though, was an email. From Kendricks Moffat. See, what Mara didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been watching. She thought I was just her quiet husband who didn't ask questions. The guy who still wore socks to bed and listened to 90s folk rock. But I'm also the guy who's done corporate auditing for 19 years. I know what fraud smells like. And for the past 6 months, Mara had reeked. We'd had weird ATM withdrawals. A $6,000 loan to someone named Lyra that never got repaid. A shared bank account she claimed was for emergency vet bills. We don't even have a pet anymore. I didn't accuse her. Not right away. Instead, I started tracking things. Created spreadsheets. Logged her login times to our online bank account. Installed a keylogger when she left her laptop open one night. I found things I wish I hadn't. Multiple accounts. Shell corporations. A vacation fund that had nothing to do with vacations. And names. Lots of names. Blaine. Denise. Lyra. Even her cousin Axton, who I always thought was too quiet to be involved in anything shady. It was like pulling on a thread and watching a whole suit unravel. I took it all to Kendricks. A guy I knew from a workshop years ago. He's the kind of lawyer who wears gray suits with fraying cuffs and eats trail mix during depositions. But sharp. Ridiculously sharp. We built a file. Quietly. Carefully. And that morning, while I was sipping lukewarm coffee on the dock, he executed it. Bank accounts were frozen. LLCs were flagged. The IRS was alerted to some irregularities. By 10 a.m., the texts started rolling in. Mara, what the FCK did you do? Blaine, you're gonna regret this, man. Denise, you petty, miserable little man. I didn't reply to any of them. I just made myself a bagel and watched the lake. It was beautiful, quiet, like the world had finally stopped screaming. Later that afternoon, Mara showed up at the lake house. She didn't knock, just stormed in, eyes blazing. You went through my accounts? I looked at her, really looked at her. She was wearing that green jacket she always wore when she traveled. Funny how even in betrayal, some habits stay. I did, I said. You had no right. You had no right to use me. For years. Her jaw clenched. This wasn't about using you. It was about testing me. She fell silent. I loved you, Mara. Even when you were pulling away. Even when you lied to my face. And still, I didn't fight back. Not until now. You ruined everything. I laughed. Couldn't help it. No, Mara. You ruined everything. I just pulled the curtain back. And then I walked past her, grabbed my keys, and left her standing there. I don't know where she went after that. I didn't care. What mattered was that I wasn't the fool anymore. And for the first time in years, I wasn't scared of being alone. I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly for a few hours, stopping once for gas and a bad coffee at some roadside joint off I-75. The kind of place with flickering lights and one cashier who doesn't even look up when you walk in. I sat in the parking lot with the windows cracked, watching an old man feed breadcrumbs to a bunch of greedy ducks behind a dumpster. It felt like something out of a dream, or maybe a memory. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. My phone kept buzzing in the cup holder. I let it. I didn't want to hear Mara's voice again. Not then. Not after she looked me in the eye and still tried to spin it like I was the villain. Like I had somehow flipped the board when she was the one who'd been cheating since the first move. I ended up staying at a friend's place that night. Brent. We used to be in the same bowling league until he tore his rotator cuff and got into meditation instead. He's one of those guys who speaks slow but listens fast, if that makes any sense. When I knocked on his door around 10, he opened it without a word, just stepped aside and gave me a beer. What happened? He finally asked after I sank into his couch. I looked at him for a long second. Then, turns out my wife and her entire family hate me just enough to plan a fake reunion, get me to pay for it, and then ghost me with a breakup text like I'm some one-night stand. He blinked. Jesus. Yeah. Another pause. He handed me another beer. You want to talk about it? He asked. No, okay. We sat in silence for an hour, maybe more. The only sound was his fridge kicking on and off. The next day, I went back to our house. Not because I wanted to see Mara, I didn't, but because it was mine. I'd bought it before we got married. Paid off the mortgage myself, room by room, with overtime and brown bag lunches. She was gone when I got there. The place smelled like lavender, like she'd sprayed something before leaving. The living room was spotless. A few picture frames were missing. Her clothes, too. The bathroom counter looked inked without her makeup bag. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel anything. Just stood there, keys still in hand, and let the silence spread out around me. Later that week, Kendricks sent me an update. 3 of the accounts had been flagged for suspicious activity. One of the shell companies was tied to a tax shelter Mara had opened under her cousin's name. The IRS was digging hard. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. So goddamn tired. A few days after that, Denise called me. I almost didn't pick up, but something in me wanted to hear what excuse she'd come up with. Brendan, she started, her voice pinched and defensive. This is all a misunderstanding. Is it? Yes. Mara, she got in over her head. Blaine and Lyra, don't. I interrupted. Don't pretend this was all her. Silence on the other end. You all sat around and watched me pour everything into a weekend that never existed. You played along. Lied. You think a frozen bank account is the worst thing that could happen to you? Try finding out 20 years of your life were just background noise to people like you. Brendan, no, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. That's not the same. I hung up. She didn't call back. From that point on, things started moving fast. Investigations tend to snowball when you've got the right people on your side. Kendricks kept me updated in emails that read like legal thrillers. He'd throw in the occasional, hope you're holding up, line, but otherwise, it was all business. Mara finally emailed me one night. Just a subject line, can we talk? I didn't respond. She showed up 2 days later. I heard the knock and almost didn't open the door. But curiosity is a hell of a drug. She looked rough, eyes puffy, hair pulled back in a messy twist like she hadn't slept. She was wearing that oversized hoodie she used to steal from my closet. The one I thought she'd thrown out years ago. Can I come in? She asked. No. She blinked, clearly not expecting that. Brendan, I didn't plan for things to get this bad. Didn't you? She looked away. It started small. Just little lies. I was angry. You were always working, and I felt invisible. So you punished me by stealing? I didn't steal. You tricked me into spending nearly 15 grand on a weekend you never intended to show up for. You used a fake LLC to reroute money out of our joint account. You and your cousin literally staged a betrayal and called it a trial. What the hell would you call that, Mara? She didn't answer. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me so she wouldn't see the way my hands were shaking. I gave you every chance, I said. Even when I knew something was wrong, I didn't confront you. I watched. I waited. I hoped you'd come to me. But you didn't. You just kept taking. I was scared. You weren't scared. You were comfortable. We stood there in silence, her eyes searching mine like she was trying to find a crack in the wall I'd finally built between us. I'm sorry, she said. You don't get to say that anymore. She nodded slowly. Okay. And then she left. No tears. No dramatic last words. Just the sound of her heels on the porch steps, fading with every step. I didn't watch her go. I went inside, made a cup of tea, and sat at the table staring at the half-used placemat she always hated. I didn't cry, but I wanted to. The days that followed felt like walking through the echo of a life I used to live. Everything looked familiar, but the colors were off. Like the light had changed. Too harsh in the mornings, too dim by afternoon. I'd go through the motions, shower, eat, check the mail, but it all felt like I was standing just outside myself, watching some other guy play house in my skin. The silence in the house was deeper now. Not peaceful, not comforting, just hollow. I'd find myself talking out loud sometimes, about the news, the weather, the way the neighbor's dog wouldn't stop barking, and catch myself halfway through. There was no one to answer. No one listening. I didn't go back to work right away. Used up some vacation days I'd been hoarding for no real reason. I thought I'd spend the time cleaning or fixing up the garage like I always said I would. Instead, I'd sit in the living room for hours, the TV playing shows I wasn't watching. One afternoon, I found myself scrolling through old emails. Not the important ones. The dumb ones. Grocery lists Mara had sent me. Pick up almond milk. The unsweetened kind. Don't mess this up again. Red heart. I stared at that one for a long time. It felt like I was trying to read a love letter written by a stranger to someone who wasn't me. Around the end of that week, Kendricks called. We're hitting a snag, he said. Blaine's attorney's trying to claim coercion. Says your wife and Denise manipulated him. I snorted. Is that a joke? No. But don't worry. We've got paper trails. You logged everything right. Every login, every transfer, every phone call I could get records for. Good. Keep them backed up. This could turn criminal. That word hung in the air, criminal. Up until that point, I hadn't really let myself sit with the gravity of it all. I was still stuck in the emotional betrayal, the personal gut punch of it. But now it was real. Legal. On paper. Something a judge would eventually dissect with a highlighter. I hung up and sat in my car for a long time. I'd driven to the park. The one Mara and I used to go to on Sunday mornings, back when we still liked each other. There was a little bench under a lopsided oak tree near the tennis courts. We'd sit there and split a cinnamon roll from that bakery on Grant Street. I walked to that bench without even thinking. And there, sitting with a thermos and sunglasses on, was Lyra. I froze. She saw me before I could turn back. Oh, she said, standing. Brendan, did you follow me? She scoffed. This isn't a spy movie. I jog here. I didn't answer. Just stared at her. She looked ordinary. No villain cape. No evil smirk. Just a woman in yoga pants and a frizzy ponytail. I figured we'd run into each other eventually, she said. This town's too damn small. Right? She hesitated. Look, I didn't want it to go down like that. The reunion thing. That wasn't my idea. You took the money, though. I didn't know where it came from at first. But you didn't give it back. Silence. People make mistakes, Brendan. No, I said. People correct mistakes. You all built a house out of them. She looked away. I was your friend, I said, quieter now. I was always kind to you. I let you stay in our guest room when your apartment flooded. I know. And you watched Mara lie to me. You helped her. She said you were cheating. I blinked. What? That's what she told me. That you were cheating. That she was trying to trap you. Catch you in a lie. She said the reunion was a test. I sat down hard on the bench. Did you believe her? I don't know. I wanted to. It made it easier. There it was. The whole rotten root of it. They wanted it to be true. Because if I was the villain, they didn't have to feel guilty. Why now? I asked. Why come clean? Because it's all falling apart, she said. And I don't want to be caught under it when it does. We sat in silence for a while. The wind picked up, rustling the trees. Is she scared? I asked. Mara. I nodded. Lyra chewed her lip. Yeah, she is. But she won't show it. She never does. She got up then, brushed off her leggings. You were a good man to her, she said. Too good. That's what I'm starting to think. She left. I sat on that bench until the sun started dipping low, thinking about what she said. About how easy it is for people to believe lies when the truth makes them look bad. The next few days were a blur of meetings with Kendricks, paperwork, quiet dinners, and half-slept nights. Blaine tried to file a motion to unfreeze his accounts. It got denied. Denise hired a PR firm to try to spin the story. That failed too. Someone posted screenshots of her ranting on Facebook about being hunted by nerds with spreadsheets. That made the rounds on Reddit. I didn't even have to do anything. It all started to snowball, but not in a way that felt satisfying. It just felt inevitable. One afternoon, while I was sorting old documents in the attic, I found a shoebox labeled Ireland 2008. I opened it and found our travel plans. Passports. A small collection of coins I'd saved from the trip we were supposed to take, but never did. Mara had called it off 2 days before we were supposed to leave. Said her job wouldn't give her the time off. I believed her. Now I wondered what the real reason was. I held one of the coins up to the light and just sat there, in the dust, wondering how many lies were buried in the house I thought was home. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the attic with the window cracked, letting the early spring air creep in. The coin was still in my hand. A dull, worn 50-cent euro, nothing special, but I must have turned it over 100 times in the dark. The silence pressed in like a weight on my chest, and for the first time since Mara left, I felt something I didn't expect: grief. Not for her. For me. For the version of myself that used to make plans. The guy who thought his life had direction. The guy who believed in people, even the wrong ones. I went back through the travel folder. Our itinerary, the list of bed and breakfast she'd picked, maps printed in the pre-Google era. Everything was annotated in her handwriting, back when she still made little hearts over her eyes. It was like stumbling across a grave for a person who never got to exist. In the morning, I decided I needed to get out of the house. Not just out, away. I called Brent. Mind checking on the place for a few days? I asked. He didn't ask why. Just said, "Where you going?" "I don't know." "North." I packed light. Just a duffel bag, the travel folder, and a notebook. I wasn't trying to escape. I just needed to see something different out the window. I ended up in Traverse City. Rented a tiny cabin near the bay. Quiet, rustic, no Wi-Fi. The kind of place people go when they're trying to put their soul back together in pieces. For the first 2 days, I barely left the porch. Just sat there with a pen and paper, jotting down memories. Not about Mara, about me. Who I used to be. What I liked before everything got tangled. I wrote about the time I fixed my dad's old lawnmower at 12, how proud he was. I wrote about the first time I made my mom laugh, so hard she cried. The dog I had in college, the one who used to steal my socks and hide them under the bed. I started to remember the sound of my own voice in my head. Not Mara's. Not Blaine's. Not guilt or shame or anger. Just mine. On the third day, my phone lit up. Mara. I didn't answer. But the voicemail transcribed itself on the screen. Please. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I ever would be. But I wasn't about to let her narrative back into my peace. The next message came a day later. From a blocked number. A voicemail again. It was Blaine. "Look, I know we've never seen eye to eye, but you don't have to ruin everyone's life over this. We can work something out. Be reasonable." Reasonable. That word made me laugh out loud. A short, bitter sound that startled a squirrel off the porch railing. These were people who watched me plan a whole weekend in good faith. Let me believe I was bringing everyone together for something wholesome and healing, and then turned it into a private little morality play. They treated me like I was some character in a story they were telling. Some naive fool. A punchline. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I didn't feel like a fool now. I felt free. Later that day, I went into town. Just to walk around, get a coffee, feel human again. I ended up at a small bookstore run by an older woman named Diane. She didn't recognize me, of course, but we started chatting over the counter. She asked what brought me up north, and I gave her the kind of vague, safe answer people give when they're not ready to tell the truth. Clearing my head. She nodded like she heard it all the time. Lots of men your age come through here saying the same thing. Midlife cleansing, I call it. I laughed. That's a nicer way to put it. She smiled and slid a book across the counter. Read this while you're here. Just return it before you leave. I don't charge for heartbreakers. It was some old philosophical memoir. Paperback. Dog-eared. Smelled like cedar. I wasn't really in the mood for anything deep, but I took it anyway. Back at the cabin, I opened it to the middle and started reading. There was a line underlined in pencil. The truth is never the explosion. It's the quiet after. When you have to sit in the ashes and ask yourself what was real. I read that about 10 times. Then I put the book down and picked up my phone. Not to call anyone. Just to scroll through old photos. Mara and I in Maine. Mara and I in the backyard painting the fence. Mara's laugh frozen mid-frame at some barbecue. I didn't feel anger when I saw them. I didn't feel love either. Just distance. Like I was looking at someone else's life. That's when the second call from Kendricks came through. "You sitting down?" he asked. "Yeah." "What?" "They're turning on each other." Blaine just submitted an affidavit blaming Mara and Denise for everything. Says he was misled emotionally and financially. Denise is blaming Mara. Mara's attorney is now requesting mediation. I leaned back. Wow. I'd advise you don't respond. Not yet. Let them spiral. I could hear him chewing something on the other end. "You okay, Brendan?" "Honestly," I said. "I think I'm getting there." He chuckled. "You're doing better than most." After the call, I sat on the porch until the sun dipped low behind the trees. A light breeze blew across the yard, rustling the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called out over the water. I realized then I hadn't thought about the money in days. Not the frozen accounts. Not the court dates. Not the property splits. None of it mattered as much anymore. Not because I didn't care, but because I was finally starting to remember what I cared about. I stayed in that cabin for another week. No laptop, no spreadsheets, no updates from Kendricks unless he told me it was important. I needed to breathe. I needed to figure out who I was without her voice in my head narrating every move I made. And slowly I did. I learned how to make a halfway decent omelet. I taught myself to play a few chords on a used acoustic guitar I picked up at a flea market down the road. I read that book Diane gave me cover to cover, and when I returned it, she said, "You look a little lighter." "I feel it," I told her. Back home, things were different. The house didn't feel like hers anymore. I'd moved the furniture, painted the hallway a warm, burnt orange that she would have hated. I put my books back on the shelves. I bought a new couch, not because I needed one, but because it felt like I was planting a flag in my own damn living room. And I started talking to people again. Brent and I went back to bowling, even though he still couldn't lift more than a 6-pound ball. I joined a local book club. I went for long walks without my phone. I made space. And then, one quiet Tuesday morning in early May, Kendricks called with the final piece. "They want to settle," he said. "Who?" "Mara. All of them. Joint motion. They're offering full relinquishment of the assets you named in the discovery. Property, savings, even that shady investment account in Wyoming. It's all on the table." I didn't say anything right away. "They want to avoid a public trial," he added. "Especially Denise. She's been trying to quietly sell her interior design business. Word gets out she's tied to wire fraud. Nobody's hiring her to pick out drapes ever again." "Smart." "There's one condition," he said. "They want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement." I laughed. "Of course they do. I told them you might consider it, for the right price." I grinned. "How much?" He told me. It was more than fair. Generous, even. And poetic, considering it was all technically my money to begin with. "They really don't want you talking," he said. I took a long sip of my coffee. "I'll sign it. With one amendment." "Go on." "I want one thing in writing. One line." "Which is?" I leaned back in my chair and smiled. "I want them to put it in black and white. Mr. Brendan Callahan acted in good faith throughout the marriage, and no wrongdoing was ever committed by him in any legal, financial, or moral capacity." Kendricks chuckled. "You want your name cleared in writing?" "No. I want it etched. For the record. Forever. Done." He called back 2 hours later. They accepted. Within a week, the documents were signed. My accounts were restored. My name was clean, and I had a nice little chunk of change to rebuild my life with. Enough to go to Ireland if I wanted. I didn't tell anyone. Not Brent. Not the guys at bowling. Not even Diane at the bookstore. But I did do one last thing. I sent a single email to Mara. Just a sentence. "You tested me. I passed. Goodbye." She never replied. 6 months later, I heard she moved in with Blaine again. Apparently, it didn't last. Something about him being emotionally unavailable. Denise lost her biggest client after someone leaked details about the investigation to the press. I don't know who. Wasn't me. But someone, somewhere, decided the world should know. Me? I bought a little condo near the lake. Nothing fancy, but bright and quiet. I planted a few herbs on the windowsill. I started writing again. Just for me. No audience. No filter. Sometimes I still think about that weekend at the lake house. The banner I hung. The food I ordered. The fire pit I lit for people who never showed up. But now, when I think about it, I don't feel shame. I feel clarity. They tried to make me the fool. But in the end, they played themselves. Because the quiet guy with the spreadsheets? He was paying attention the whole damn time. And he walked away not just free, but better. Still soft, sure. But smart enough to never let anyone confuse kindness with weakness again. And somewhere out there, in a dusty courthouse archive or a private folder on a lawyer's server, there's a single line that says everything I'll ever need anyone to know about what happened. Mr. Brendan Callahan acted in good faith. That's all the closure I'll ever need.